Welcome to Give It To Me Straight, the podcast from Dazzy IT. Each week, we break down technology, cybersecurity, AI, and business IT into practical insights you can actually use. Now, here's your host, Shane Knorr.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another edition of Give It To Me Straight, where we dive into real-world technology issues that we get to answer for our clients and prospects on a daily basis, so that hopefully it helps share some of that insight for you to be thinking about when it comes to your technology. I'm traveling this week, so unfortunately I don't have one of my team members to share the conversation with, but what I want to talk about is something that I'm very passionate about personally, because it's where my technical background comes from, and that relates to the topic of network infrastructure. So for a lot of people, network infrastructure really doesn't get a whole lot of thought because it sits in that closet down at the end of the hallway. All the cables are in there plugged into it. A lot of times it's just a big, huge mess in terms of the cabling, and really you don't ever want to have to go mess with it. That's by design. You shouldn't have to mess with your network infrastructure if it's set up properly. But what I want to talk about today is the type of equipment you put in place. So even though network infrastructure is not an exciting topic when it comes to technology compared to, say, like AI or some end user functionality, the network infrastructure itself, and particularly the network switch infrastructure, think of it as the foundation of your entire technology. Basically, what you have in place when it comes to your network switch infrastructure determines how well your network is going to perform. And it doesn't matter whether you have a bunch of servers sitting in the closet with that, or whether you're using cloud-based or SaaS, software as a service applications. The network itself is one of the most important components. So a lot of times we get questions about the type of equipment you should use for that. Unless you're an organization that has, say, 5 employees or less, and it's a very small network, you really do need to give proper attention and, more importantly, proper budgeting when it comes to network infrastructure. Network switching is, again, that main backbone, that foundation of the entire infrastructure. And I tell folks, if you've got a limited budget, you really need to prioritize where you put your dollars. And for a long time, there have been cheaper options out on the marketplace when it comes to network infrastructure. And we're not going to get into particular brands. I will just say that for businesses, there is a difference between equipment that you would use in your home network versus what you should use in your business. And there are several reasons for that. The most important one is the network performance. There is business grade network infrastructure or business grade network switching, and then there's home user grade switching. And the differences there are basically when you're at home and your son's playing on his video games, or you're using the iPad to connect to social media, it's not all that critical if the network slows down momentarily. Now, your son may be upset that his game is lagging and he can't play with his friends effectively, but at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. In a business, however, that latency, that performance can have real world impact when you're running financial charges and transactions over the network, when you're running video calls, when you're uploading information or transacting with information in a database. Any type of latency or slow performance in the network has a direct impact. Now, when it comes to network switch infrastructure, we tell folks you need to make sure that it is leveraging a business grade equipment. And one of the other things we highly recommend is that you go with a vendor that has 24-hour support with that. Because I have seen it firsthand, a couple of decades ago in my first business that I started and ran. We chose cheaper equipment, didn't pay attention to when that support was available, and we had a failure on a Friday afternoon about 4:45 in the afternoon. Picked up the phone to try to call the vendor, and it was about 15 minutes in, and they said, "We're sorry, we've closed for the day and for the weekend," and we were out, completely inoperable for the entire weekend. And it was because we chose a lower grade solution that did not have 24-hour support. So even though it may not seem like a big deal on the front end, having that 24-hour support, having it available on nights and weekends, And having a business grade equipment is going to ensure that your operations are continuous, or at least as well as they can be. And when you do have problems, you have access to the proper support. Now, when it comes to equipment itself, we've had clients come to us and ask, well, you quoted us a network switch that was $2,000. And we tell folks, when it comes to this equipment, plan on a 5 to 7 year life cycle. So if you think of that $2,000, you spread that across that 7 year lifespan, and it's only a few $100s a month when you amortize it in that manner. Most people look at that one-time capital expenditure and think, oh my gosh, that's $2,000. That's crazy to have that much money going to a box that sits in the closet. But if you put it in perspective, that box in the closet enables every component in your environment to work when it comes to technology. It's pretty important. It's almost like saying you run a delivery business and you're going to scrimp on your delivery truck. You're going to buy something that's used or has not been maintained, or you have no idea where it came from. You wouldn't do that with your delivery truck, so don't do that with your network infrastructure. So we've had clients come to us and say, well, you quoted us a $2,000 network switch. We saw one at Best Buy that's $200. Can we just use that? It still has 24 ports. It's the same thing, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case. What you see at the big box stores are typically, again, that home user or very small business infrastructure that does not have the performance throughput. It does not have the security features. It does not have the reliability. It doesn't have that 24-hour support. And even if it has a component of that, if you think about it in terms of economics, you can't get the same thing at 10x less than what the mainstream business solutions cost. You have to give up some value somewhere. I mean, common economics will tell you that. And the idea that we're going to get something for $200 that most businesses are spending $2,000 on and assume it's the same thing puts you in a very risky scenario. Now, having said that, are there cheaper solutions on the market? Absolutely. And I said we weren't going to get into vendor names or anything like that, but we have been a Cisco. I'm dyed-in-the-wool Cisco. I started my career working on Cisco's network infrastructure 20 some years ago. So I'm a firm believer in the value that they bring, but they also carry a higher price tag. So we get that. Are there cheaper solutions out there? Absolutely. But you got to look at the scale of it. So if you get a Cisco switch that's being recommended or a Meraki switch that's being recommended at $2,000 and you go and try to compare it against a $200 switch, that should raise a red flag for you. It just cannot have the same performance, security, and functionality. You're giving up something in that cost exchange. So that's one of the most common questions we get is, can we use something from the big box store? Or I found this on Amazon. We've even had customers come to us and say, hey, you gave us a quote for a Cisco Meraki switch, and we found one on Amazon that's half the cost. Cisco and or the business grade network infrastructure manufacturers go through a partner network, meaning that they only sell through their designated partners. And so Amazon and the big box stores typically are not going to be there. And what we see when it comes to particularly Cisco infrastructure is what's called gray market equipment, meaning that it's not real or it's got components that have been pulled out from an overseas operation and rebranded or presented as the same thing. So gray market equipment is a huge concern, especially when it comes to Cisco. A lot of the other enterprise or business grade solutions have the same issue, especially if it comes from overseas. There's lack of controls there. The last thing I'll throw into the mix when it comes to network infrastructure, make sure that you understand the vendor that you're buying from, that hardware manufacturer, where are they located? There are several vendors in the market today that come from China or Chinese-owned or Chinese-based organizations, and there have been multiple government warnings when it comes to this equipment because there's a concern that Chinese threat actors could have a backdoor into that equipment. There's been multiple instances where the U.S. government has found those backdoors in the equipment. A couple of vendors have been named and listed by the U.S. CISA advisory saying, do not put this equipment into your environments. and some of them have even been banned for sale inside the US. So when it comes to network infrastructure, make sure you know what you're putting in. It is the foundation that all of your technology runs on, and you don't want to cut corners there. There are ways to save some money when it comes to network infrastructure. There are some vendors that are going to be less expensive, but you want to make sure that you're buying a true business grade equipment that has the 24-hour support, has the certifications, and has the assurances that it is going to perform as you need it in your environment. If you have questions on this, let us know. One of our team members will be happy to dive into specific requirements, price options, features that you may or may not need or want to be aware of. We'd love to offer any help we can around that. Thanks.